We'll do a review on Likutei Sichas in Chelek Chof in volume 20. This is the first Sicha for the Parshas Vayigash. It's a Rashi Sicha. And the Rebbe discusses the beginning of the Parsha in which he spoke to Yosef. Yehuda came to Yosef and he said to him, Daber ba'ozne Adoni. Yosef was the Mishnah Lamelech, second to the king, and he plotted and he wanted to hold Binyamin. So finally, Vayigash of Yehuda, and he says, let me speak Dover Bein Ozne Adoni. Rashi explains, meaning that you should pay attention. You can't sudvore beznach. The Rebbe is going to elaborate and explain what does Rashi need to say this over here, and the Rebbe will explain how the Mefarshim explain it, but the Rebbe doesn't accept that because this language of speaking in your ears is what we find in many other places. So the Rashi doesn't say anything anywhere else. And finally, the Rebbe will explain that in most places, there's other people around that are listening in. And when we say ba'ozni in the ears, it means while everybody is listening. But over here, Vayigash Elov, he's talking directly to Yosef. So why would he need to say in his ears? As the Rebbe will explain, we'll go step by step. Aleph. Betchilas HaSedre, the beginning of the Sedre, bringt Rashi the Werter Vayigash Elov. He quotes from the Pasuk Vayigash Elov. And he says, let your servant speak Dovor Ba'oznei Adoni, something in the ears of my masters. That's Yehuda saying to Yosef, I will speak Dovor Ba'oznei Adoni. Und is Mefaris, so Rashi explained, does it mean Ba'oznei Adoni? So Rashi explains, let my words enter your ear. What does it mean? What is Rashi coming to explain over here? Was ist schwer in the Wörter Dover Bosne Adoni? What is difficult in the words? This matters in the ears of my master, but Rashi verantwortet mit Pirush that Rashi is answering with his commentary. You konsu dvorei be'oznecha, let my words enter your ear. So what is it that Rashi is trying to answer with this? So let the Mefarshim explain that normally, if one would understand this pasuk, if now Rashi, that the ozne means in the ear, like whispering in the ear, but that would sort of be disrespectful to Yosef speaking in his ear. That's why Rashi explains that it means you konsudvore, pay attention to it. Learn them first. As the Pasha tertait from Bosne Adoni, the simple meaning in the ears of my master is Shebikesh letaber beoznav mamish, that he actually wanted to speak in his ears. Das heißt, so a rein red nor beoznav shel Yosef, which means to speak only in Yosef's ears, as keiner soll nit hören was sagt, that nobody should hear that which Yehuda was saying. Aber da kemen azoi nit teichen. But you can't really say it over here, that meaning like this positive shot speaking into his ear. Weil sie ist nicht kein Kovet zu reinreden bei unseren Mishnah Lemelech. It is not respectful to whisper and talk into the ear of the second to the king. Yosef was the second of the king. Therefore Rashi cautions and says that here it doesn't mean in the ear, as der Teich von Dover beozne Adoni, what means this matter in the ears means is yikonsu dvorai beoznecha. Let my words enter your ears, meaning pay attention to them, not physically speaking into his ear, but that the words should have the proper impact, and should pay attention and accept that which Yehuda is telling him. But this is not the first time in the Torah which we find the words be'oznei. Rashi never explains it this way. Why would Rashi have to explain it over here? So the Rebbe continues. Das is aber nicht muban. This is not understood. Men gefindt an ähnlichen Loshen. We find a similar language etliche Mol früher in Torah, several times prior in the Torah. It says, Vayashkim Avimelech Goimer, Vayidaber Goimer Beozneim. So this is in the Pasuk in Vayera, Perik Chof, and Pasuk Hey, so over the Pasuk Ches, so over there it says that he spoke to them. He got up in the morning after the whole story with Avram, with Sarah. So it says that he got up in the morning and he spoke in their ears. What does it mean there? Or it says Bayan Ephraim. But by Ephraim it says also Bayan Ephraim. Goimer Baoz Nebnei Ches. He was trying to buy the plot of land, and Avram, and Ephraim said, and he said Baoz Nebnei Ches, also in the ears. Or by Daber El Ephraim Baoz Amoritz, this is Avram talking to Ephraim. While the Ozne Amoritz doesn't explain, but in the Alle Erter, in these places, Kemeni Taichen, you can't interpret, you can't translate as their dibur is given belichisha bozneim, that it was in a whisper in their ears. You can't say it over there, because the as the Rebbe explains now in the bracket, when Avimelech was talking to his servants, he wasn't whispering. Zichrat Avimelech nit geret mit avoda vina eifum fun piv bozneim. Certainly, he did not speak in a way that his mouth was in their ears physically. Also, when Ephraim spoke, when it says Ba'oznei b'nei Ches, wasn't in a whisper in the ears of the b'nei Ches. Adarabah, on the contrary, sein Dibur is given to Avram, and he was actually talking to Avram. Nor euch die b'nei Ches haben gehört seine Rede. They also heard. He spoke to Avram, Ba'oznei b'nei Ches, while they were listening. Well, Derech said the Burish Avram to Ephraim Ba'oznei Amoritz. It's the same thing as when Avram speaks to Ephraim, and they were listening in, wasn't in their ears whispering. So we see already this language used in the Chumash in all these places. When Afopi came, Bavorant nit Rashi in the Allerter. And in all of these cases, Rashi does not caution as the Pirush from Ba'oznei Chuli is Yikonsu Dvorei Ba'oznecha. Now, what does it mean Ba'oznei? That it should enter your ears, or Kadema, or some other things similar to it. Why is Rashi necessary? Why does Rashi find it necessary to answer it over here that it doesn't mean literally, but it means you consider dvarei b'oznecha? Just like in the other places, we also know there it doesn't mean literally, as the Rebbe has just proven in all of these cases. Where it says ba'oznei, it means that he spoke loudly, not physically whispering in their ear, and yet it says in the ears. And Rashi doesn't say anything, doesn't explain. So how come Rashi needs to explain it over here? And the Rebbe also asked why Rashi quotes the Vayigash a love in his commentary. What is this? Is only explaining what the oznei Adoni means, not the Vayigash. It's not, Rashi doesn't really bring it down because it's the first words of the parsha. Because Rashi never, in all the other parshas, the Rashi never brings down the first words of the parsha in his commentary. Euch nicht move on. Also, it's not understood. Favos is Rashi mighty from Posik. Euch the Werter Vayigash Elov. Why is Rashi also quoting from the verse the words Vayigash Elov? And then he says, "Yikonsu dvori necha." This that Rashi explains, "Let my words enter your ear," is only explaining is a pirush b'lois of the Werter dover bosne adoni. It's only explaining the meaning of the words, a matter in the ears of my master. So why would Rashi have to bring down Vayigash Elov Yehuda here? What is that important here? And don't make a mistake, the Rebbe says, that Rashi just brings it down because it's the beginning of the parsha, because Rashi never brings down just because the beginning of the parsha. Meken it's Zogam. Rebbe in the bracket explains. Can't say as Rashi is der mit oisun nor zu on zeichnas cholos hasedre. That Rashi's point, purpose is, what Rashi wants to, by bringing down Vayigash, is to reference the beginning, to point to the beginning of the parsha, because as we said, spoken about it many times. In that case, if Rashi needs to bring down the beginning of the pasuk, then Rashi should have started every portion mit ihre erste Wörter with the first words. Und Rashi tut das nicht, and Rashi doesn't do it. Seiden, when there is mefarish the Wörter, only when he explains the words does Rashi quote the beginning of the words of the verse. So we can't say that Vayigash Elov is just to bring the beginning of the parsha, because Rashi doesn't do it. It means that it's explained. So what does the Vayigash have to do over here? Now the next Rashi. The Rebbe is going to explain the following Rashi base. Weiter stellt sich Rashi auf this. Pasuk says, "Val yipchar abcha." He says, "Yidaber dover bozne adonai." Speak in your, enter your ear. Then it says, "Val yipchar abcha." Don't get angry. Why would Yehuda have to tell Yosef, "Don't get angry"? He's mefarish mikan atalomit. So here you see, from here you learn shediberei lav koshes, that he spoke harshly with him. That Yehuda spoke harshly with Yosef, because he says, "Don't get angry." Why would he get angry? So must mean he spoke harshly with him. So what is Rashi coming to tell us over here? Because when we read in the Posik later on, we don't see openly any harsh words that Yehuda was saying to Yosef. But Rashi says, when he says "Kamecha kapare," it included various hard things. You're like pare, meaning I can kill you like pare, etc. You don't keep. So those were harsh words. So this is sort of introduction. How does Rashi know that he does the pshat in Kamecha kapare? Because it says Al Yichar Abcha Bavdach. Learn them meforshim, so meforshim learn. As Rashi bavorin der mi, that Rashi is cautioning us by saying that you learn shedibro koshes in the posik shel achad is Rashi mefarish, because in the following verse Rashi explains. Vazei direit von Yehuda habman halten dvarim koshim, how the words of Yehuda contained harsh words, difficult words. How did we see that? Because you're like pare, bringt Rashi kama pirushim fun medrashe. Rashi brings several interpretation from the medrash, from the medrash of the words. Vidozayin and dvarim koshi, that those are hard words. Val derech ze oif adoini shol. Rashi explains, my master, you have asked. Is Rashi mefarish that what it means, what Yehuda was telling Yosef, mitchila ba'alila basa aleinu. To begin with, you came with a plan to accuse us. You had plotted this, to make it up against them. So that's harsh. So the Rebbe sagt Rashi says, soll man nicht meinen, als der Hechrech auf dem is nor von jene Wörter. So one should not think that what is the proof, what forces us to say that this is the meaning is just from those words, because those words themselves don't necessarily point that they were harsh. Baladrabe. Pshuto von die Wörter, the simple meaning of the words is as is eine nicht kein Dvorim koshim. They're not difficult words. So that would not, so by yourself, you don't really see that. So Rashi proves it. Nor mikan atalomet. But from here, since he says don't get angry, you should be of cautious. Und wie bald me gefindet befedisch im Posik in Dvorim koshim. Since you don't find in the Posik clearly any difficult words, Muz Rashi bring in the Pirush, that forces Rashi. So Rashi therefore has to bring the interpretation as jene weiter dicke Reitz and given Dvorim koshim, that these later on words, the words of Kichamecha Kifarei and Adon Yishol contain these harsh things that Yehuda was telling Yisrael. I feel even though we need the medrash, but still, this is the pshat, because otherwise, why would he say don't get angry? So it must mean that he spoke to him cautious. But the Rebbe asks, why does Rashi have to say mikan? Could have said melamed. He spoke to him. Rashi says mikan. And therefore, we verstehen the arichas haloshin in Rashi. We have to understand the lengthy language that Rashi uses. Mikan atalomed. From here you learn. When Rashi will gesagt bekitzer, if Rashi would have said it briefly, in a shorter way, melamed shedibarei love koshes. Nicht mekan atalomed, but this teaches us that he spoke to him harshly, under hadgoshe mikan, without the emphasis from here. But when I verstanden, you would also understand as der hechrech lefarish the weite dikeret als dvorim koshim, that the proof and the force to explain the later on words as harsh words is from val yicharabcho. Warum? The losh melamed, because it teaches us. That's what Rashi would have said. Weist. Hados is nit an inyan v'shteit befedishim posik. It's not a matter which the posik clearly, that you can see that there's harsh words. But this is azar was for the talimud. This is something which requires learning, understanding. So we learn from this. Wenn in posik volt befedish gestanden lit pirush hapotrish vorim koshim, if in the pasuk would have been written literally hard words, then it wouldn't fit. Pasuk nicht zu sagen, malamet shediberel of cautious. Then it wouldn't fit that this teaches us to be cautious. That he did difficulty. So malamet is already meaning to teach you that he spoke cautious, but not mikan atolomet. This. But the Rebbe says whenever Rashi uses mikan, it's coming to exclude that it's here and not another place. Nor bigeret kamopom. But as already spoken many times, b'shas Rashi is moisef mevayer. When Rashi adds moisef mikan, when Rashi adds mikan, meinter der mit shoylel sein. So Rashi means to negate a zweiten Ort, a second place which might possibly be a source for this interpretation. Rashi says no mikan. From welchem avot lechedig gekent that lois lernen themselves an inyan, from which you could have seemingly learned out the same idea. Also do is Rashi shoylel at zweiten Ort. Same thing likewise here. Rashi negates other place, but from involvement lechedig gekent that lois lernen, that it would seemingly you would have been able to learn out from them. Hagam as befedish status nit knal, but even though it doesn't say befedish, as we said before, it doesn't write written here, as the Berel of Koshes, that he spoke to him difficulty. And Rashi is saying, no, that mikan. So where is this other place that you could have said? And Rashi says, no. That man verstehen, was is Rashi shoyle mit sein Sogen mikan atolomit. So we need to understand, what is Rashi negating by saying mikan atolomit? From here you learn that this is the source from where we know it. The Rebbe explains in Eis Gimel that in all the other cases, one was talking to the other person while others were listening in. So Ba'oznei B'nei Ches, Ba'oznei Avodo, over there they were. So he was talking to Abimelech, he was talking to Ephraim was talking to Avram while the others were listening in. But in our case, Yosef was only talking to Yehuda. And on top of that, it's Vayigash Elom. So it wasn't even in the ears of the others. That's why Rashi is explaining over here. Gimel, the Bir Bazeh. In the Allah Erter Hanal, in all of the above mentioned places where state der Loshen, Be'oznei, Ukiyetzebei, where it says Be'oznei, or similar, Eider men kommt zu unser Pasik, before we come to our Pasik. Retzich wegen Adibur in der Anwesenheit von mehr wie ein Mensch. You talk about a speech in which there was more than one person, so you weren't spoken to one, und der Wort be'ozne kum ba'vornem bepashtes. When you say be'ozne, in the ears, coming simply to caution, as Arab haben gehört direkt, that there were many that listened to the words. You spoke to one, but it was listened to by others, wie in the psukim. Bayan Ephraim hachiti es Avraham be'ozne b'nei cheis koimer. So Ephraim was talking to Avram while the Ozne B'nei Ches, or Vaidaber Ephraim was B'nei Ches. Avram was speaking to Ephraim while the Amoritz were listening. Wo der Dibur und Unterhandlungen seinen Gewinn zwischen Avraham und Ephraim. The speak and the dealings took place between Avram and Ephraim, trying to purchase the plot from Ephraim to bury Sarah. Zog der Pasuk, the Pasuk says, Azarot was geret, be'ozne b'nei ches, be'ozne amoritz, in the ears what they were present, be'ozne amoritz. Das is given b'maimet b'nei ches, amoritz, as they were standing in an oifun in such a way, as oich zeyom does gehert, that also they. So he's talking to Ephraim talking to Avram, but it was listened to by the others. Zeyom does gehert, noch mehr. Mider kavana, that was the intention, that they should hear it. Val derech zeh in posik vaydaber gomer bo'ozneim, b'shteit by Avimelech bo'ozneim. So what does it mean over there, bo'ozneim? Is madgish that emphasizes as Avimelech hot alein gered l'chol avodov. That he himself, there was no other person talking to what they were listening in, but over there the emphasis is that Avimelech himself spoke to all of the servants. Geret in an oifun, as they alle haben allein gehört the bure. They all listened and they all heard the ozne, they all heard what Avimelech was saying. Was the alle haben allein gehört the bure. They himself heard. Was the farat as gepoilt as vayiru hanoshim that they got very fearful from what he told them what happened. Avimelech. So therefore, over there, ba'ozne means talking to the many. By posik, vayigash goimer vayomer daber dover ba'ozne adoni. But in our posik, it was nobody else there, it would seem. It's over shver. The dibru toch given blois to Yosef. It was just to Yosef. Upashut, and it's obvious that Yosef had them dibur gehert. He heard it. He was talking directly. Not having to say, I'm talking to you. He was the one that was there. So what is the pasuk emphasizing and comes up with the novelty? Oh, this will be ba'ozne adainim speaking to you. He is speaking to him. And now we also understand what Rashi says, Vayigash, to more even emphasize that there was nobody else listening in. Al Pizay is moving from Rashi is mighty from Pasuk. Euch de Werte Vayigash Elov. We also understand why Rashi quotes the verse, also Vayigash Elov, weil das verstärkt die Scheile, because that increases the question. Lule de Werte Vayigash Elov, had it not said Vayigash Elov, hat man gekonnt verantworten, bedeutige Koponim, then you could have answered in a squeezed way, as Yehuda hat gerät seine Rede in an Eufen, that Yehuda spoke his words in such a way as euch alle Anwesende dabei. So he spoke it in a way, beoznei, while the others were listening, ochi b'mitzvah mesgehert. Und der Rebbe hat Yehuda gedacht matgish sein. That's why I had to say, Yidaber beoznei adoini, that you pay attention because other people are listening, but I'm talking to you. As Yosef also b'miyuchad zuhören seine Rede, that Yosef should specifically listen to his words. Choseret nit nor to him, nor as Herren can't mention, although he's not talking just to him, he's talking to many people. So he's telling him, you dover you pay attention, even though other people are listening to. But vibal dober the pasuk is matgish vayigash elov. The pasuk says that he came to Yehuda, that Yosef came up to Yehuda. The say says no Yosef derzu. Was Yehuda ve'echav seine schon von früher gestanden lifnei Yosef. In addition to the fact that Yehuda and Echav brothers were ready from before, standing before Yosef. Und sie ihm gerät. They were already talking from before to him. But so Yehuda speziell, the nentet Yosef, Yehuda specifically, specially, came close to Yosef. Is move on. So it's understood that Yehuda gerät to Yosef, and he spoke to Yosef in a special way. Oder as bloß Yosef get sein Red, or possibly just Yosef. Only Yosef could hear what Yehuda was saying because he came close to him. Is Hodra Kushli Duchta. So the question comes back: what is the Adgosha Bosne Adoni? So what is the emphasis in the Osne Adoni? If it's a situation in which you want to include others, or it's a situation you want to specifically emphasize, like by Avimelech, that he is speaking to them. And if it wouldn't say by Yigash, maybe over here too, we can say that it's an emphasis that Yosef should pay attention. But since it says Vayigash Elov, it seems like specifically that's we came close to him for him to listen. What is the Adgosha that he's telling you pay attention when he's already speaking to him? Is Rashi Mefarish? So therefore Rashi explains, as is for Anocha Adgosha in them word Be'ozdei. That there's an additional emphasis in the word Be'ozdei. Yikonsu dvorei be'oznecha. Let these words enter your ears. The reid zol na reingehen be'oznav. They should go in. Ukilushain kvet kedushas ad merichom admur. As my father-in-law, the language of my father-in-law, the Rebbe, need blois herren, not just to hear, nor der herren. You should sense what was being said, not just to hear, but to get it, to get what you hear. Yehuda gewollt mit sein Dibur Peulen auf Yosefen. Yehuda wanted, with his word, to influence Yosef to Mishana sein Achlatose, to change his decision. He was going to hold back Binyamin. He wanted to change it. Unaros los Binyamin, to let Binyamin go. Hat der Riber Madgish given, as Yosef soll der Herren sein der Reit. So therefore, he emphasized, you should accept my words, not just to listen. You consider what benecha. Soll der Herren sein der Reit, what he spoke about. And now the Rebbe explains the second Rashi. Noch dem Dalet. Noch dem Rashi is mefarish as be'ozne adoni meint. You consider dvorei be'oznecha. That he was telling you, let me enter your eyes. Ears to enter, so you should really accept what I'm saying to you. Is a mamshech vayichar apcha, and as Rashi says, mikana tolomed shdiber of koshes. From here, you learn that he spoke difficulty with him. Lulei dem frierdikon pirush, without the previous commentary. What men gekent uplernen as Dibber love cautious. We could have known that he spoke difficulty with him. Der Fund was Yehuda hat gesagt Yedaber. Just the word Yedaber. Rashi has said many before. Daber is Lashon kosher. When he says Yedaber, you can think that that is the kosher. He says Yedaber no dover. Wenn Rashi bringt schon doch do dem Klau, was Rashi nimmt on, bipshuk, when Rashi could have brought that Dibur is a Dibur kosher, and Rashi could have said that Yidaber no means kosher, but Rashi nimmt on Pshutish al Mikro, and bring Kama Pomi Pirush. Rashi accepts that the word dover means dover kosher, as umetun, wo steht Dibur, says Dibur, nicht Amira, not saying Amira, but Dibur, make this a Lashon kosher, means a hard word, a hard language. So we know that he spoke to him different because it says Daber. Is Rashi dos shoylul zok. So Rashi rejects and says, Mikana talomid. Davke from Vayigash abcho from here can man das uplernen. We can learn unit von dem Loshen Daber Gomer. Why is this? Und der Tam der Refi ist verstandig von Pirusha Shalifne Yikonsu dvorei boznecha kidlakamon. Is because he says Yikonsu dvorei beinecha. That's how we know that Yedaber here doesn't necessarily mean the difficulty, the kosher. As the Rebbe will explain, because since he wants him to change his mind, because he says Yikonsu dvorei boznecha, it doesn't have to mean that it was dvorim koshim, because that dibur is a dibur that changes the mind. It can be considered davar kosher without being diburite koshes, because just because he's saying such things to change his mind. Let's look inside. Hey, der tamal derech hapshat, if them was dibur is a loshen kosher. Why is the on the pshat? Why is dibur a harsh language, a hard language? Is weil dibur is euch meloshen yad ber amim. Dibur is also comes from dominating the nations, being ruling over the nations. Dibur. Speaking hard means that you are speaking words to dominate. Daber echad ladir, as the language goes, one ruler for the generation. Was the far, because the only one, tal tul makel, v'hachal kol kodem. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu says to Yehoshua, take a stick and knock them over their backs. So basically, it's daber, it's dominance, it's ruling. That's understood as dominating with force. Und der Riber, and therefore, wenn man nutzt dem Loschen Dibur, nicht Amira, when you're using language of Dibur, not saying, but Dibur, meint es a Dibur mit hatoichen from Memsholo. It means Dibur that has the contents of dominance, harberet, which harsh words, gewaltige to dominate over the other one, to rule over the other one. Leidem kumtois, so then it turns out, as jeder sort the raid was kenna mentioned by Virkun, that any type of speech that can convince, have influence on Poilen and to impact of him to beiten sein Meinung Beschluss, for him to change his opinion and his decision. Even the words themselves are soft words and begging words, but those are words that change the person's decision. Also, those words are called dibur. Because they have the idea, the content, the meaning of dominance, because you're making the person change to what you want him to do. Papi is verstandig. As der Fund, was steht, Yad, Yedaber, Goimer Dover, is not kein hechrech gomur, that from saying Yad Dover, it's not a complete proof as Diber love of cautious. that he spoke harshly to him. Why? Lachri Rashi Taich. So he was trying to have the words enter his ears as the dibur is given by. He spoke in a way was all Yosef machen zu der Herren that he should accept the Reid to accept the words and become convinced by them. They should move him. They should impact. Is that filu when Yehuda would geret rakis v'tachanunim. Even if Yehuda would speak softly and begging, Balder hat mit seiner Red gewollt übermachen deite shel Yosef, since he wanted what he wanted, that is with his words, he wanted to change Yosef's mind. Kemen if the Red sagen Yidaber, you can say Yidaber. So that wouldn't mean that he spoke harshly to him. It just means it's a way of dibur, of dominance, because that is to change the mind. Is the river, is the hechrech of dibur of kosher? So therefore, where do we know that he spoke with him harshly? For Vayigash abcha. Therefore is Rashi Matkis, that's what Rashi emphasizes, Mikana Talamed, that this is the way that we know that he speaks to him cautious, not from the fact that it says Yidaber, because although Yidaber means usually harsh words, but that's because it's dominance. And in a case when you try to change somebody's mind, you can call it Yidaber, even if you speak softly, even if you beg, it still can be called Yidaber. So therefore, over here, Mikan Atalamed, that he spoke to him harshly, and that's why we interpret later on the Psukim, as the Rebbe brought down from the Meforshim, that the Chamoicha Kipare and Balila Basa, that he came with a complaint, this is all in a harsh way. Both. The Roder from Bavoidosenu is, what is the lesson in our Avodah? Shas Yehuda gewollt Poile of the Mishnah of Melech Mitzrayim. When Yehuda wished to influence the second to the king of Mitzrayim, which is Yosef, men in the Gazer Mitzri, he thought that he was an Egyptian. Azer soll befreien Binyamin, he wanted him to free Binyamin. Hat zum allem erst mit den angeheben Reden Koshes. First, he started to talking with him harshly. Harbe und streng geredet. Harsh and strict words. The Chayra would seem, what kind of logic is this? Es kann doch sein, als mit Rakes wird man mehr öfter wie mit Koshes. It's possible that softly you will be able to accomplish more than with harshly. Is a Seichel Mechayev, so logically it dictates, as frier darf man sich proven mit Weigerei. First you should try with soft words. Und tachanunim and begging. Und neu mit Weigerei is man nicht poil. And if you cannot influence with the soft words, erst dann hebt man on it cautious. So then you start with harsh words. Because you can't do the other way around. You can't get him angry and then go softly. We can't frier proven mit harbered. Can't first start with harsh words und einkasten mit zweiten and get him angry. Und dann noch übergehen zu tachanunim, and then you'll transfer to begging. On good words. You can't do that. You have to start softly and then go. That's logic dictates. So why does Yehuda start speaking harshly? Now the beer in them. The explanation is Kol's man es handelt sich wegen inyonim chitzonim. As long, if we're only dealing about external matters, Geldverdiensten, earnings of money, kademe, führt man sich leid secheldike cheshbeine, so then you conduct yourself under logical dictate, how it comes out, figured out, calculated logically. And then you figure out what is the better approach, what pays off better, what pays. But when we're dealing with a matter, his soul is tied to his soul, Binyamin to Yaakov's soul. It's a matter which touches on the soul of Binyamin and on the soul of Yaakov. Dan macht men nit kein cheshbonis. then you don't make any calculations. Wie es lohnt sich besser? What does it pay better? Man hebt dann gleich mit dem ganzen Sturm. You start immediately with the full storm, fully. As the world says, as es tut weh schreit man. When it hurts, you scream. So you start off by screaming. Und in die Sachen is Adrabe. And in these matters, word that touch the soul, in such cases, is on the contrary, divrei koshes, when you speak harshly, iber zeigen dem herer as das is be'emes negeya. That convinces the one who listens that this is something really important. Negeya benefesh is important to life, to your soul. Nit der meint guilt, he doesn't mean making money, a benkel or a chair, honor. Covet, honor is similar to that. Das macht, as you consider that makes that my words enter your ears because you see that you mean it. Hebt dann gleich mit der Sturm, you start with a storm. Klappt auf den Tisch, he's banging on the table. Und rechnet sich nicht mit kein diplomatische Geschbeinis. He does not take into account, he does not consider diplomatically calculated diplomatic steps that feel their zweiter, so the other one senses. He seems that it's something which touches the inner of his soul. This impacts the other person, as also that he should give in, he should yield. Bis as es wird until it becomes in a relaxed and willingly. Well, in this case, you don't use diplomatic, you don't go, you start off with cautious. That's why Yosef started, Judah started to talk to Yosef cautious. Zion, limud. And this is a lesson. This is something we learn from. Mikanat alomed. From here we learn, as Rashi says. Al kol hazmanim al kol hamekoymes. In all time and all places. B'shas es handelt sich wegen Ratven a Yiddish Kind von sein an Eved b'Mitzrayim. When we are dealing here about saving a Jewish child, Binyamin, from being a slave in Egypt, as Yosef wanted to hold him. Und I feel when the Mishnah Lemele B'Koyach HaMelech verlangt us, even if it's demanded by the second to the king with the authority of the king, is demanding that he stay here. He says, "Nit kein Zeit demol zu kleiden committees." Then it's not a time to go pick committees from Groisem Melumodim, from people who are very learned or experts, which will in a slow and methodical and in a settled way to investigate the Jewish history in Egypt. Und dann noch stellen zu Abstimmung, and then they're going to put it to a vote. Was is good und wie viel es darf kosten, that which is good and what it needs to cost. Und betrachten, and then to consider, to consideration, was wollen sagen die Mitzrayim to them allem. What are the Mitzrayim, what is they going to say to all this? Was das verlangt doch aber Sonderkomitee vom Ulamodim. That would require a separately committee from expertise, welche kennen gut die Mitzrayim, who know very well the Mitzrayim, essen und trinken zusammen mit sie, to eat and drink with them, etc., etc. So this is all that you need to go through when it's in a logical way. But that's not the way to save a Jewish child. You need immediately, with the greatest alacrity, with the greatest speed, to start with the greatest of storms, great noise, to save the child from the education and the conduct of Egypt, which is a chinuch hepech Torah, which is an education which is contrary to the Torah, but to his boilus, which leads to getting mixed in pikuch nefashis mamish, which is actually saving lives. B'shas men gate mit dem weg, when you go in this direction, that firtas to them, that leads to, when you go with the storm without no calculations, So if is given by Vayigash of Yehuda, just like it was Vayigash of Yehuda. Durch them was Yehuda is a gekommen mit a Sturm. That when Yehuda came out with a storm, is nicht nur es is nicht given der Inyan von Avodim. Not only did it not become slaves und Avdus and slavery, but Adrabe. Vayemer Parei Goimer. So Parei says, "Va'et lachem es tu veres Mitzrayim, I'm giving you the best of the land of Egypt. Und noch fardem, Lefonov, Yelech Lefonov, Arts of your head. Machtmen beis Talmud shemeshom tetzayro. You make a place of learning from which instruction will come out from in Mitzrayim. And his mechanech. It's all started by this dibur kosher. And his mechanech has the talmidim beis and klor. You educate that the students know it very clearly. How the Yaakov's children need to conduct themselves. And they know and they're able to be people of instruction. Tom Tetzerah. To be able to ruin halacha according to complete the halacha according to the right halacha, the learning, the shmaitza should be halacha. Al-derech says is benegeh der hashpah milumaylo. Similar is also the influence from above, from B'chinas Yosef Tzadik Elyon, from Yosef, who is called the Tzadik Elyon. B'shas ha'id geht der Starkheit kavyochel, when ha'id goes with force, with the strength, so to speak. Bet in his respalot some Ebersten, when he prays, he begs, and he prays to Hashem, mit ha'toikev kavyochel, similar with a strength. This is to the Eberster. So when we're talking about Yosef Tzadik Elyon, the Rebbe is talking about the Eberster over here, who's called the Yosef Tzadik Elyon. And when you ask the Eberster with a toikev, with a strength, Poil teras v'lo Yosef lisapik. Yochel cannot hold back, cannot restrain himself. From above, they feel the desires of your hearts for the good. All that you need. From his full, open, holy, and wide hand. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Vayigash, Tovshin Chofei.